What is up, grinders? Welcome to an MMA Crunch Time Before Lock. I'm your host, Mike, aka H3 Buddha, here with Stroll Patrol, John. We've got 12 fights, back to back to back to back. We're stuck at 12 fights, man. We need more fights, more opportunities. But we have a competitive main event, and that's going to be your starting point, like any other slate. But there's some big favorites. We got some close middle line fights in the middle range. I think this is a fun card. I'll tell you right off the bat, this card comes down to women's fights.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a pretty good bet because I think there's like 4 of them on the card, like 4 out of the 12. So yeah, it's almost certainly gonna have a female fighter on the winning lineup. It's a really compelling like DFS card. It's not the highest level in terms of like, oh, this person's gonna be the next title contender. But it's really like they kind of changed the pricing a little bit. Like we don't normally have like 9,600, and sometimes we don't even have a $9,500 fighter. But yeah, the 2 fighters with the best chances of getting a first round win are like 9,500 and 9,600. That makes you really have to make a decision, not just about those fighters, but about how you would fit them into a lineup. And yeah, so there's not a ton of like first round, equity, inside the distance equity outside of those 2 higher priced fighters. And you can kind of make a case for any of the underdogs. There's just a lot of unknowns, but they don't have very good win equity. They don't have very big odds.
This isn't a Squirrel Patrol. This isn't that typical, you have faith, Vidal, Martinez, Tokos, right? Like, I don't know if that's this type of card.
Yeah. I don't know. We'll see. It's going to be interesting. It's hard to it's a hard card to figure out.
100%. It's hard, but I call this like one of those ones where we have an edge, because when the ownership's going to gravitate towards a Tom Nolan, when it's going to gravitate towards Adrian Yanez, the main event, I think it's easier to play the main event in this one. And then it's like, I don't want to say this because it's terrifying, but I think like Yanez is such a historically slow starter. Like, great strikes. He's skill for skill going to probably beat the guy up. But then if you look at that fight as a whole, it's like, I mean, he's going to by far be the highest owned guy, Adrian Yanez, and his opponent is super high owned as well. It makes me not want to play that fight, and it's terrifying.
No, yeah, I kind of right there with you. I think that this is a sneaky card because you've got some fighters that have really, really high, early win probability, like Tom Nolan, Omar Asai, Adrian Yanez is up there, Abus Magomedov. But there's kind of some strikes against all of them. And with Sai and Tom Nolan, it's the price. Like, it's just hard to fit them into a lineup. With Adrian Yanez, and actually, I would kind of go down to like Chaos Williams and put him in this category as well.
Yeah.
The first, round win odds look good, and the inside the distance line looks good, and it makes it like tempting to put them into a lineup. Trap. But if they are not getting that early, like they're not like these super high volume guys. So if they don't get that first round finish, or they don't get that early finish, they might, put up a 65-point win, and then you're suddenly, that might be kind of extreme on the low end, but they might not put up a win. We're really happy about the score.
Yeah, that's what's crazy about the card. I 100% agree is that, differentiating is actually somewhat easy to do on this one. And I mean, let's just throw it out there. It's like all these people, Yanez, Gatto, Nolan, Sai, you kind of put them in a hat and pick one out, and I think any of them could score 110 plus. And it's like, you got one in Melissa Gatto that's 20% owned. I almost am forced to play some of these low owned women's fights. I mean, it's obvious that there's 2 women's spots, actually. Yeah, 2 that are lower paced, right? Like Emily Ducote and Vanessa. Vanessa's got win equity, and that's about it. And unfortunately for this card, it's going to mean a lot, right? Like, she actually is in play because of that, but I still temper expectations for that particular fight. Like, I don't see it being high scoring unless there's some meme type low percentage armbar or something, right? Like, that's just how frustrating this slate is like, I would like to go there and go, okay, Vanessa in my lineup, 7K. She's going to get me 75 points. No, she could score 50 points in a win.
Yeah, it's that's tough. I was talking about this with Blender. Like this fight, it's so tempting to say like, oh, I want to go over the field on Ducati because she's going to be low owned. She's got a great chance to win, but really might not put up a high score, and we're probably like reverse blushing it or something. But like, this is going to be the fight where like Demopoulos is going to like slip, fall down, dislocated elbow, Estelle Nunez style. Ducati's getting the knockdown, getting the quick win bonus. But yeah, I mean, I would much rather have more Demopoulos than more Ducati. Ducati's like so high priced and so low volume. It's just so hard to see how she gets on the winning lineup. I do like this fight could go perfectly for her, and I can see her just not putting up that high of a score.
Yeah, it seems like she, out of all of the fighters on this slate, is the one that you can just look at and go, it's not that appealing, And Vanessa's more than off to go off the back for a little bit and herky-jerky motions to, on the feet to just slow the pace down. 100% agree. So I did say in the survey this week that 3 perhaps women's fights are going to be important for it. That one would be more so for the win equity, like we said about Vanessa. But I think Angela Hill versus Pinheiro, man, this is like priced where we need to have interest, and the public has no interest in this. This is what separates the big boys from in the playground, right? Like 8,300, Angela could like fall into 90 points. Like she has the volume. Pinheiro's a violent girl. Like she's got a veteran in front of her and Angela Hill who, been hurt before, but pricing is everything. And it's add in the factor that it's a pivot away from some of these, like we talked about, Chaos Williams, right? Chaos going to be popular. If he doesn't get that first round and falls off a cliff, that fight's got action, start to finish.
Yeah, so actually the Angela Hill Pinheiro fight is one of my favorite to get to. I'm going to be over the field on that fight. Angela Hill has over 100 DK points in 2 of her last 3 UFC fights. The 2 wins, they were 3-round decisions. So you might look at the inside the distance line and think, oh, I'm skipping over Angela Hill. There's no way she gets the finish. She might not eat it to put up 105 points, and she's 8,300. So like if she hits her expected outcome of a win, where she's just putting up a bunch of strikes, that's potentially a very high score. I bet 365 actually has now some interesting UFC props that I've seen for the first time in the last couple of weeks. They actually have, you can bet on the prop of significant strikes landed on each fighter in the main card. Angela Hill, I think, is about even money to go over 75 strikes, but that's not even including whether or not she's going to get the win. She's only like 4-1, I think, to put up 125 significant strikes. That's pretty decent. So, and that's pretty good DK score, and she's not going to see ownership. Pinheiro on the other side is a Scroll Patrol Takedowns award winner this week.
Yeah.
But yeah, Pinheiro actually has some high scoring win conditions as well. It's priced in the mid range. People might skip over it. They're going to maybe go to the Chaos Williams Carlston Harris fight in the middle. I don't mind going to each of the fights, and I don't mind each of the underdogs. And then maybe you're putting one of the really high priced fighters into your lineup, but you're not trying to jam 2 of them in and then ending up with a couple of underdogs that really have a low shot of both ways.
I love when we're on the same page. It makes this thing a lot easier. But, for the show purposes, we need to, go back and forth because it's like normally nobody wants to go to these women's fights. And I just think it's so important for a balance of win equity, like you talked about, that upside of 75 to 100 significant strikes isn't the worst in the world. There's sneaky control time in that particular one. And in that same range, you're going to have one fight where it's like, I always talk about pace, right? Pace is important. We talk Chaos Williams. Okay, yeah, he's got first round equity, but outside of that, he's got his hands down and he's got his chin out and he's slow pace striking. There's Demba Gorimbo versus Brahim Maj. If this fight doesn't hit optimal, I'm not a shoey guy. I might have to do a shoey because like the pace is here. Demba Gorimbo, they're pushing to the moon. They got The Rock behind him. They've got he's a big boy. He's got a new market, right? He's got volume power striking. He's got grappling chops. And then they got Ramiz Brahimaj, right? This guy who came in with a little bit of hype, I'd say, in the beginning of his career, kind of set back by Court McGee, has the prototypical scoring criteria, right? What do we like? We like takedowns. We like control. We like pitter-patter. He fits all of those molds. And he's expected to win inside the distance over his opponent. We have, 2 or 3 fighters that are expected to win inside the distance over their favorite fighter, right? Ramiz was like plus 165. I think Themba's 185, right? So it's not the biggest crazy difference in the world, but these are the fights that I like to target when you see that, because that means action's going to be here. So would you agree? I mean, I'm shocked that one of these guys doesn't hit optimal. I'm going to be like, what the hell?
It's interesting because I haven't heard a single person that likes Brahmaj in this fight all week. So, but the line's pretty close. That makes me a little bit worried. But yeah, I like Grimbo as well, but I'll have to put in some, like, by the odds and by the score, and you should put in a good amount of Ramiz. And I agree.
Mhm.
This is a great fight to target as well, priced in the middle range. I have a hard time with Brahmaj. I just can't forget the fight was 4 years ago. He literally got his ear punched off, and like it's difficult. It was Max Griffin. Like
Yep.
hard to put him into my line. I'm surprised he's actually had so many fights since then. Like that looked bad.
Court McGee.
But the doctors can do. What was that?
The Court McGee, I thought you were going to say. I don't even count the ear. The ear was disgusting. Like, I can't even think of that, right? Like, that was a setback. But the Court McGee one's even worse. Court McGee, oof, oof.
Right. I don't know why the odds are so close. To be
I
honest,
don't get it. It doesn't make it well. And he's favored to win inside the distance, plus 145. It's gone down. And Themba's plus 175. Like, how is Bermihaj more expected to win inside the distance against the favorite? I don't get it.
Yeah, I agree. But Grimbo's credit, like he doesn't necessarily need a finish to put up a high score. He's got a 113 point DK point decision on his record. I mean, he's only got 3 fights in the UFC. He's on a 2-fight winning streak, which is good. But he can put up some volume without necessarily getting the early finish. It's like I'm going to end up with more Grimbo, but like, I'm going to end up with more Grimbo, but so is everybody else. So I'll definitely have some Brian Maj, to kind of balance that out in my multi-entry.
It's funny. I'm looking at the lineup HQ. All of our little tag points are right in the middle range. This is a middle range card, and having the main event right there, which we'll talk about in a little bit. And we both tagged this guy, Alatang Haile. This is an interesting one, and I really think we need to break it down from the X's and O's. This is a guy that doesn't score a ton of fantasy points at 7,600. I think I'm looking towards him as more of a win equity guy, John, than anything. And it's like, people will just blindly build their lineups based upon what we tag and whatnot. And I don't think it's smart. I think you kind of have to read it, right? Because look, this is a guy who has 64 points in a win. I don't know if that's going to be enough on this slate. I understand he's got Clayton Rodriguez, who's been finished.
Shots fired. Shots absolutely fired my way.
Yeah.
I'm not reading blurbs.
That's how I start my build. The one day actually. There was one day actually that you guys had 5 fighters tagged, both of you together. And so I just plugged in those 5 players and then found one. I read Liam and Squirrel's article, found an underdog that you both had to win, but wasn't tagged, put them in. And that was my biggest win. That was the one that was like a few thousand.
Yeah. Well, that's the problem with this particular fight, right? Is because Alatang Haile has win equity, has probably some of the better win equity on the slate, right? But Clayton Rodriguez, I think, is one of the unknowns on this slate. Would you agree with that, X factor wise? Because this is a guy who scored a hell of a lot of points before. I'm not counting the Shannon Ross fight. Let's not count that. He's got volume striking. He's heavy-handed. But it's also like this fight could be more like the Vanessa and Ducote fight than not. And that's scary to me. Like pace-wise and outcome-wise.
Right. So Alatang Ali is a fighter that I wouldn't necessarily be so high on a different card. Mm-hmm. But you've got some real long shots on this card. I mean, we have a $6,600 fighter. We have a $6,700 fighter, $6,800 fighter. Like, these are fighters that don't have very good chances of winning their fights. So what if we just don't have a bunch of underdogs that win? Alatang Ali has about the same win probability as the fighters priced above him. So you're kind of saving some money. And if none of the super underdogs win, and then, if Barboza loses, if Panera loses, right? Bahamaj loses, then suddenly Alatang Ali, even though he doesn't put up huge scores, he doesn't need to put up a huge score, right? You need that $7,600 70-point win maybe to make everything else work. So yeah, he's a fighter I tagged, but he's not a fighter I'd be super high on a different card context.
Yeah, and that's why it's crazy. We are almost forced to, right? He's got the same inside the distance line, TJ, as his opponent, plus 300 for each guy. And one of the big things that I preach is looking towards those spots long term. Brahim Mihaj, right, has a better inside the distance line than his opponent. Can it be trappy? Yes, because sometimes you have like a grappler who could, like John said, get those takedowns over 3 rounds, and then who cares about the inside the distance? Garimbo's got 1,000,000 points in takedown wise.
Right. I don't know if it's a trap, but actually, we kind of have a question in the chat about this fight, and about Vegas odds. I'll say like Vegas odds on UFC do tend to be like much less liquid and less efficient than say like odds for the NFL, right? It's really difficult to beat NFL lines because so many people are betting them. I agree. Sometimes the odds really don't make sense, and it's just difficult because sometimes you look at it and go, "Man, these odds don't make sense." I'm going to go with Garimbo here, and he loses, right? You're like, "Oh, now I feel like an idiot." And then sometimes you don't bet it, and then he goes out and Garimbo's going to have a crushing, or a dominant win. So there is Murphy's Law aspect to it. But yeah, I agree. I mean, the UFC lines do tend to be less efficient, particularly when you start looking at like round props, stuff like that.
There's bias as hell too, right? Like Clayton Rodriguez getting finished, that's going to push the line towards, oh, he's going to get finished again. That's just how bookmakers do it.
Right. Yeah, exactly. And like sometimes you see things that don't make sense, and then you do see like wild movement too, like especially after weigh-ins and stuff like that, and in the week leading up to the fight. I mean, a lot of times these lines are set, and no one's really looking at the fighters, and then it's like, oh my god, he's in shape or not, and then you start to see some significant line movement once you actually see the fighters on the scales.
Now, TJ, the main event is an action fight, and it's right here in this range. The problem is, if it's a kickboxing fight for 5 rounds, there could be a crap ton of points scored over 5 rounds for both fighters. So you could kind of get bailed out a little bit more with Barboza, and that's why that ownership is caked in so high, right?
Well, if one has $7,600 remaining, one big underdog, 4 favorites, should they play, hypothetically, I don't know who this person is, but should they play the Alta Gengai guy or Carnelossi?
Well, I was going to save towards the end because that's one of my favorite plays, just pace to fight. So
I'm going to do it then, and I'll wait to hear why.
Yeah, I think you could go either way, but I'd probably go Altang Elite.
Damn it, Squirrel! I made the decision already. Now I'm second guessing it.
No, Squirrel. One thing is, I think Alatang Ali's ownership is going to be a lot higher than 23. He's going to be closer to 28, 30, and Carnelosi's is going to be a lot less because Pierre Rodriguez has been talked up this week across the industry.
All right, yeah, then go Carnelosi. Looks like she could get a finish. So, and it's the Vegas odds aren't necessarily indicating that. She just looks in shape. So. Yeah, I think you can go with Carnelosi, and there's some like safety and volume there. She's not. You're more likely to get points probably from Carnelosi than Altang Ali in a loss, if that makes sense.
That's the problem. Is like it's obviously for win equity, Alatang's right there, but I also worry about they both win. I tend to say Carnelosi would outscore. Just she's more aggressive.
Yeah, I agree. But it's what makes it an interesting fight card. Because there's a lot of similar fighters, and I think there's going to be some close scores, and that there's not necessarily anything. There's no like win equity. Like everything's appropriately priced, which is not always the case with DraftKings. And they really did increase the prices on the top end fighters, which makes it difficult. This might be one where we have a good shot of a losing fighter landing on the winning lineup, and fewer fights you have on the card, the chances of that increases. So yeah, this could be a card where we see that.
Yeah, let me talk about that. Carnelosi and Pierre Rodriguez. Like I said, I see around the industry, there's a lot of picks on Pierre Rodriguez, who this is actually a tricky one because we talk about this all the time where you have 2 grapplers, right? What happens? there's one round dominated by one, then negated by the other. That's absolutely in play here, and I acknowledge that, right? But I'm looking for a ceiling out of these two is really what I'm looking for. And Pierre got rushed up the chain, right? She got like into the UFC 5-0. Last fight out, she gets arm barred, which isn't a good look. Also, Liam said in that Kay Hansen fight, she didn't look all that good. Kay Hansen, I think, doing OnlyFans at the moment. Carnelossi is post USADA. Carnelossi could be a monster. Let's just put it that way.
Like I said, she looks like she's in shape. So it looks like it, and she is. Yeah, she's capable of getting the finish. She's got 2 finishes in her 3, out of her 3 UFC fights. I think both of her wins have come via finish. 3rd round submission and a 2nd round knockout. Na Liang, maybe there to be finished, but yeah. So she looks like she can put up a high score. Those fights were some time ago. I think she's been dealing with some injury situations, but she looks good. So, like I said, like once you see the fighters on the scale, sometimes your opinion changes. And so, yeah, I think the problem is like the Vegas line, right, hasn't really moved in favor of Carnelossi. But I think she'll put up some points. She's got a floor there. And Piera Rodriguez, I don't think Rodriguez is going to see maybe as much ownership as we're putting in there. And she's capable of putting up a high score as well, and she doesn't need to outscore those fighters priced above her, right? She can kind of get there with a lower score than Yanez or Gatto or Nolan.
Yeah, that's she's in that range where it's 200 more to go up, and I just consider that 9K plus as its own like ecosystem, to say the least. And TJ, if you're coming in here to talk the upper echelon fighters, that's where I was pivoting next.
I'm coming in here actually to talk to either of you or our viewers in case you were thinking about MMEing today and decided not to, or you were going to say, hey, maybe I'll throw an extra couple lineups in that $15 contest. It's 35 minutes to lock, and there's 7,000 spots left in the 100K to first contest. It is wide open right now.
This is one of the slates to do so as well. Like, I'm not telling you how to spend your money, but this is an edge type of slate. And you asked in chat, Nolan or Omar C. We will talk about that right after this ad read. Sorry, TJ. There's never been a better time to sign up for Roto Grinders Premium with NBA, PGA, NHL, MMA, and MLB. And we've got an option for whatever level you're looking for. Get yourself a 6-month combo subscription at an exclusive price of $469.99. That's a savings of $250 instead of buying every one of those 6 individual months of combo premium. You can also get your first month of RG Premium for $40 off for a limited time. Those that want a test run before buying can dip their toes into the water with a 3-day pass, $19.99. Check the links in the description for more information there. And I would definitely take advantage of that over a weekend, because what's better than, a weekend of baseball, playoff basketball, NHL to dip in and get in there. And now we can pivot towards that upper echelon. This is a fight card where I think looking towards these guys and looking at the ceilings, John, is going to be important, right? We both perhaps tagged Tom Nolan. Tom Nolan's in a bounce back spot. I look on this card and I see 2 bounce back spots. I see Abus Magomedov. Neither of us tagged because we're terrified of him. And Tom Nolan. Both these guys got knocked out, got finished. And now they're in a spot where it's like, all right, here's the UFC giving them a softball. We have Warley Alves, a veteran who in his own right has upset the apple cart before, but it's a little bit more difficult to get behind him. And it's certainly difficult to get behind Martinez, who I don't think the guy's UFC caliber. Let's just put it that way. And he's severely undersized too. If you looked at the weigh-ins, Tom Nolan looked freaking massive. This is a great spot for both these guys to get back on the winning track. And they're both super high owned.
Yeah, I don't know. It'll be interesting to see, how the top end shakes out. I think we're a little low on Omar C's projection and ownership. There's no reason really for him to be projected. We had the median projection. Yeah, and this, the ceiling projection as well. We haven't projected below Adrian Yanez. I don't know why that would be. Because it makes me worried that it's just a result of us not having enough information. So
what about late notice? Do you think
Yeah,
late
it's late
notice
notice,
takes a
and he doesn't
factor?
have like a lot of UFC history. He doesn't even have like a Dana White Contender Series fight you can go to that's like on UFC stats. But he's got a better first round finish, better inside the distance, and better win odds than Yanez. And there's no reason to think that like Yanez would be much higher paced than C. So I think C is probably like I'd rather play C than Yanez in a vacuum, but C's also the most expensive fighter on the card at 9,600. Tom Nolan, these two, like fading either of these two guys is scary. Like Omar C or Tom Nolan, they both have about a 40-something% chance of getting the first round win. If they don't get the first round win, it's difficult to know what happens, but there's no particular reason to think they would be really low volume. I think Tom Nolan has a pretty good amount of significant strikes landed per minute. The issue is really just fitting them into the lineup. So that makes me end up with maybe a little bit more Abus Magomedov, who again, yeah, like you mentioned, kind of in a get right spot. I think Magomedov is going to be one of my higher end owned fighters here. I mean, we're showing him with a pretty good amount of ownership. I might end up with more of him than Tom Nolan, even though I like Nolan a little bit better just because of the pricing.
More than Giannis for sure, I would imagine, right?
Yeah, exactly. And because if Giannis doesn't get that first round win, and he's got a good shot at getting a first round win, and I think it's a little bit better than 1 in 3. But if he doesn't get it, then it's he really might not put up that high of a score.
Yeah, that's what's terrifying for me. And two more things to go over. There's their opponents there, Salvador and Vidal. Like, I don't think I'd be all that surprised if either of these two win. But did you see the Tamaris Vidal and Gatto line where it opened? That offshore book that likes to open things, opened it as a pick'em. And Gatto is down to what, a minus 400 now. I mean, it's just been constant flow of money on Gatto. And what's weird to me is that the inside the distance isn't starting to, usually you'd start seeing the inside the distance start crashing. I think point per dollar fighter on this slate, Gatto might be one of the better ones, but leverage wise, power wise, what have we seen Vidal do before? She's upset the apple cart, man. I mean, Ramona Pascal, a flying knee knockout. That was like zero ownership when she did that.
Yeah, it's interesting. Vidal is another fighter that I haven't heard anybody say anything good about her. Like trying to listen throughout the industry. Well, who thinks she's going to win? Nobody. But the line is, she's a heavy underdog, but it's not that heavy. I mean, I think she's got a better odds to win than I think Vanessa Demopoulos. Yeah, slightly better than Demopoulos, which is surprising because I've heard a lot of positive things about Demopoulos. Like Vidal's got a better chance to win, and she's cheaper. So like I kind of went back and forth with Vidal about whether to write her up in the article. I'll definitely have her probably closer to her win percentage or win probability than her projected ownership. I'm assuming her projected ownership is pretty low. Like 15%. So yeah, I'll probably have a little bit more of her than 15%, probably closer to the win probability of about 20-something percent. But yeah, I mean she actually has a floor as well. Like if Gatto doesn't get the first round win, then Vidal can put up some points in a loss as well. And 6,800.
You can get away with it. Almost any form of a win is good for her as long as she's not on her back.
Yeah, unless we have a ton of underdogs win. That's a pretty good price tag. So I'll have some Tamaris Vidal. It's just interesting. I haven't heard anybody really give her a shot this whole week that I've listened to.
I mean, it's hard to, right? Like there's some footage of her against our girl Eileen Perez, right, in some basement of some South American organization, and she's getting her butt kicked, and then there's like an illegal strike to a ground opponent. Vidal's like, yeah, I won, and it's like, did you win? Did you?
I think Eileen Perez is on UFC 302 next week.
That's a rivalry. I can't wait because I think she's against oh my god, Edwards, who those two girls hate each other. They had a fight at the PI once, but we'll talk about that in a couple of weeks. Yeah, they got
to a fight, like not in the ring.
Yeah, exactly.
Not in the octagon.
No. My last point really on this card, why the hell is Salvador getting so much ownership? I mean, compared to all the underdogs, he's got to be one of the higher owned, if not top 3. It's like, okay. Yes, we talked about Yanez being a slow starter. He's lengthy for moving up, right? I believe Salvador moving up. Why? Why is the ownership here?
I don't know. He's one of my lower owned fighters. I mean, probably price. I mean, it is again, if you start trying to fit in two of the 9,000 price fighters, well, you're gonna have to find some savings somewhere. He's not like my favorite fighter this week. I write an article on underdogs and didn't include him in it. So yeah, I don't think he's necessarily got a great shot here, and I don't know that the fight again, like we kind of mentioned, it might not be that high scoring if we don't see an early finish.
There's two fighters I'd rather have in this range that are super, super low. I'd rather take a shot on Alves, or I'd rather take a shot on Tokos. Tokos is a volatile fighter, just so you know. This is a guy who has gone out as like a minus 600 favorite in the past and just absolutely laid an egg. So, I mean, these are the volatile fights that we like to go after. It's just now, newcomer.
You're really selling me on Tokos.
Yeah. I know I'm selling it, but
yeah,
that fight's interesting because what does it look like? I don't think anybody knows what that fight looks like, because C could look like I go for the takedown, I submit you immediately, and then he's at 96 points, and you're like, you didn't even get the knockdown, you're not at 100 points. But that fight could look like multiple takedowns and then a deep first round finish, 135. And then it's like, what does the decision look like? Then that fight probably doesn't have anything. It's just wild that Toko's getting 15%, and I feel like C should be, like you said, a little bit higher owned.
Exactly. I think Omar C will end up a little bit higher than we've got him projected, and I think we've got him under projected in terms of his like fantasy points projection as well. But it's an interesting fight because we just don't know, and we've seen some of these short notice replacements come in and do much better than expected. We've also seen like Jim Miller, who one of these guys, Jesse Butler, down like 2 punches, and they clearly just didn't belong in the UFC. I don't want to say Jesse Butler.
No, say it. You mean like a guy named Martinez on this slate?
What was that?
No, you're kind of like saying like maybe like a guy like named Martinez on this slate,
Right? Yeah, exactly. But we've seen some of these, seen some of these fighters do well, some of them not do so well with the late replacements. There's no game log in either of these guys, so we don't really know what the fight will look like. But I do know MRC's got a huge chance to win, huge Vegas odds to win, and really good inside the distance line. It's just that, if Tokos comes out and gets the win, we're going to be saying, well, I didn't know what either one of these guys looked like, right? So, I didn't know, I didn't have a game log on them. So, didn't know statistically other than the Vegas odds. It's kind of all we have to go on unless you're really starting to like dig through some tape.
Yep. And the last thing, the main event, man, this is a competitive one. I almost wish we had like a minus 250 type of favorite in this, just because it would make lineup building a little bit easier. And 8,500 Lerone Murphy, he can get there, obviously, almost, volume wise. He's not the best volume, but I feel like, you're stepping up in competition. You get Edson Barboza, who's going to force that action in front of you. That's going to make his ceiling go a little bit, floor go a little bit higher, because you've got that pace in front of you. And I mean, everyone is going to play chalk Barboza. I don't get that personally. I mean, is it because he looks like aging like fine wine? I mean, both of these guys are shredded, absolutely shredded.
Yeah, so it's been referenced. I think you guys referenced it on the Ground and Pound podcast. But yeah, the post you saw to era. So these guys' careers are getting a little bit longer. These guys are looking great earlier, later in their career. So we've got guys coming out of retirement, and all right, I can fight. It's difficult for me to get Edson Barboza's fight against Sadiq Youssef out of my head, where I thought that fight should have been stopped in the first round, and I needed Barboza to win, and I was I'm done. He took such a beating in the first round that it really looked like the ref could have stopped it at any point and said, okay, that's it. Yes, Sadiq Youssef wins. And then Barboza just had the gas tank and came back and won over 5 rounds. I don't know. I think Barboza is going to see a lot of ownership here. We're seeing projected ownership right around this win probability. There's a possibility this fight busts, right? Like there's a possibility this fight goes 5 rounds and busts. What if it ends in 3.5 rounds?
Ugly.
Of somewhat low volume. Lerone Murphy is probably more of the volume concern than Barboza. Like, what if Lerone Murphy just wins a slow-paced 3.5 round fight? So I don't think this is a main event you have to have. Don't let me talk you off of it if you have a really strong feeling about Barboza or Lerone Murphy. Anything can happen. and it could go 5 rounds, and that's just enough, priced in kind of the mid range that it just gets there over 5 rounds of medium pace. But it's certainly not like one of those main events where, like, oh, you got to pick a side and put that fighter into your lineup, because the fight could bust.
Yeah, the tone of this card will be set early. If Vanessa gets a win, you're going to be like, and you don't have her in at least some lineups, you're going to be like, oh man, what a start, because you got that first underdog decently low, and that allows you to do whatever you want with your lineups. What we really didn't talk about was Chaos Williams and Harris. I'm surprised we didn't, but it's the dead heat middle, 8,200, 8K. Chaos Williams, like we said, I think, well, we did hit on it, but I just feel like talking about Harris is important, right? As leverage.
Yeah, exactly. I'm probably gonna have more Carlston Harris than Chaos Williams. I think Chaos Williams, people are gonna see the inside the distance line. I mean, his name is Chaos, so they're gonna put him in their lineup. It's well priced in the mid range. I do think Carlston Harris is a little bit of leverage here. It really just comes down to write what I put in the write up there. Chaos Williams has more than twice the ownership, like 2.5 times the ownership. It's basically a 50-50 fight. If Chaos Williams doesn't get the early win, he might not score that well. Whereas Carlston Harris maybe has some ground game ability to rack up some grappling points. So there's no real reason to be favoring Chaos Williams that much in this fight. So yeah, I'm going to try to get the leverage with Harris.
Yeah, and listen, if you're not playing lineups, you're not doing anything, this is a card where you can take a bunch of bets, put them together, do a round robin. We rarely talk about bets. Ariana Carlosi by submission is like 14-1. Just saying, just throwing it out there, John. 14-1's got to, against a girl who just got submitted.
Yeah.
Gonna hit the mat.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. It's a good betting card, good DFS card. It'll be interesting, looking forward to the fight starting in 20 minutes.
You got it. Hey, UFC 302 in 2 weeks. We got a week off finally. John, it looks like you'll be in the building. Yeah. Islam and DP here. 12 fights. Maybe something happens. Maybe there's another fight added. I hope. But we will talk about that in 2 weeks. We hope you guys have some winning lineups if we don't. And we'll see you guys in 2 weeks. Thank you, guys.